Hello, everybody. How wonderful to gather here together. I have spent 40 years in films, first at National Geographic Films and Walt Disney Studios as an independent producer before and since. I've helped to bring more than 35 films to the screen. Two of them are the reason that I'm here tonight. First is March of the Penguins, which was released here as La Marche de l'Empereur. I acquired the rights to the original French film at Sundance 20 years ago, created the US version that won the Academy Award and still stands as the most popular and highest grossing nature documentary in history, second highest grossing documentary in history. Little film about emperor penguins that changed a genre and changed something about the history of cinema. You know, you learn a lot from every film that you make, and my biggest education from March of the Penguins was not about penguins. It was about cinema and audiences. And if you make a film that respects the audience and gives them something with which they can connect, a feeling, emotion with which they can connect, they will show up. And when the audience shows up, the audience moves, the audience acts. And the second film that brought me here tonight was one that I produced 10 years ago. It was a film called A Plastic Ocean. And when I agreed to produce A Plastic Ocean, I didn't expect it to be a big box office hit, because I think if people have a choice between seeing, I don't know, Iron Man versus Wolverine or a documentary about plastic in the ocean, they're going to see Iron Man versus Wolverine. But shockingly, A Plastic Ocean had extraordinary viewership, extraordinary adoption. Many, many millions of people saw it. And what was most important was the impact that A Plastic Ocean caused. It became the primary advocacy communication for climate adjustment and awareness about plastic in our oceans and in our waterways. 18 months after A Plastic Ocean was released, Europe passed its single-use plastic directive. A few years later, it went into full effect. Belgium, of course, did a step further and had even more aggressive legislation about banning single-use plastics for sale anywhere before the EU did. The film has caused the change in laws, more than 150 laws around the world. EU-wide laws, national laws in India, Australia, New Zealand, anywhere in the world where there has been a legislative adjustment or a regulatory adjustment about single-use plastic or plastic recycling requirements for plastic to be recycled or the way they're manufactured so they can be taken up in the ecosystem. That film actually became the primary advocacy tool to cause that social impact change. So March of the Penguin taught me that the audiences are so much larger than the general Hollywood industry believes. And Plastic Ocean taught me that films properly activated don't stop at the screen, they stop in the room, and then they continue on into policy. And this is the discipline that NewFrames is built on. On our website at NewFrames, we have a tagline that reads like poetry, but it is really a method. It is beyond films toward action, a continuous arc, from script to filmmaking to screening to audiences to legislation to changes in people's lives. And the mission is to close the gap that European democracy can no longer afford to hold, that separation between the people who make the policy and the realities that the policy is supposed to address. So how do we close the separation? You bring civil society and industry and policymakers into the same room, watching the same films, and invite them to stay in the room for discussion and action afterwards. You build a public that doesn't currently exist. I actually want to rephrase that. The public exists, but they don't know that they exist because they're never in the same room. And you put them in the same room and they begin to recognize each other and dialogue and discussion happens. And then there is a place to gather, recognize each other, and change. So NGO and commissioner, filmmaker and editor, citizen and rapporteur. That is what an international film festival of advocacy has to be and is going to do. What you're going to see here, this is our pre-launch. This is the method in motion. NewFrames, and thank you to TheMerode, our extraordinary partners at TheMerode, which I will just say here, best club in the world, have brought Darren Aronofsky and the European Parliament together earlier today to talk about AI and culture and creativity. Tomorrow, the discussion will continue here today with the Digital Trust Summit. Darren, you are a little bit modest, a little self-effacing, but you are one of the primary intellectuals of our generation, one of the primary philosophers of our generation. You express your philosophy through the cinema that you make. Every single one of your films is extraordinary and memorable. Gratitude to you for what you bring to the screen. Today, you are in the chamber where the rules are written that will define the next decade of European cultural production. And tomorrow, here at the Digital Trust Summit, the futures of business and technology leadership here in the EU and globally. Cinema meeting the policy moment. The NewFrames Festival will open officially in the spring of 2027, and that's where we begin to scale it. In 2026, the European Commission titled Europe's agenda as Europe's Independent Moment, Europe's Independence Moment. Europe is having to decide for the first time in 2 decades what it wants to be. These are decisions that the cinema was invented for. Because the world that we live in is shaped by the narratives that we experience. We don't go do things and the narratives catch up to us. The narratives are told, and then we follow the stones that the narratives have laid down for us. There is no more powerful narrative experience than cinema. It is built to serve those experiences, and NewFrames is built to create those experiences for all of us. So tonight, we begin here. Welcome to NewFrames, and it's my pleasure to bring to the stage Darren Aronofsky and Kendell Geers in conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a wonderful talk. Slightly outside of my comfort zone here because I normally do the art program at TheMerode called Art Matters, where we ask the question, why does art matter? And last night you had a wonderful talk at the Cinematheque where somebody asked you if cinema was art. And you made an interesting...
Oh, they asked me if I was an artist.
Yeah, yes.
A lot more aggressive.
A lot more aggressive. And you had a wonderful answer, which is about artists get into a flow. And one of the subtitles of the Art Matters program is Art Changes the World, one perception at a time. And that's what we just heard. This idea that cinema can be proactive and actually influence how we see things. And I know that your film Mother you described it last night, but repeatedly in the press as a rage, as an anger. Do you still have the anger?
It's a good question. I was just telling the story yesterday. I started working with a Jungian shrink, and they introduced me to my shadow. And like a week later, I wrote Mother in 5 days. It's time to re-meet my shadow. It's been a while. But it definitely came out like a fever dream. And then it's funny because for the next year that it took to get it made, we continued to work on the script. And we did develop it a bit, but every time we tried to develop it and change it too much, it just fell apart because it was very much, there was a lot of dream logic. And it's kind of like when you wake up from a dream and if you spend too much time thinking about it, it makes perfect sense when you wake up, but the more time you spend with it, the less sense it starts to fall apart. So there was a lot of energy in it. And I think at the time I was thinking, I was kind of envious of rock musicians or any type of musician who can write a song maybe in an afternoon, and it can sometimes become an emotion and an anthem for a generation, if not forever. And I think as filmmakers, and I think as artists, you can do that too. In certain types of art, you can really try to get a single emotion into a painting. And I was very curious if that was possible to try to get that into a movie, to like really have that same type of emotional force. So, yeah.
For the audience, I mean, my question about the rage.
Probably no one has seen Mother. How many people have seen Mother? Oh, well, thank you.
That's really good.
Usually it's no one's here. Yeah.
But for the audience, for those of you who haven't seen Mother, it is foregrounded as being about climate change. It is about the state of the planet. And you, in your interviews, you did speak about this rage, and you spoke about your son and this idea that you felt that you needed to make a film about climate change. So my question about the rage is, has anything changed since then, or do you still feel this compelling need to speak about what's happening with climate change?
I think things have changed in that when I worked on that movie, I guess it was, maybe you could help me with the year. I don't remember the year. It's, anyway, at least in America, it hadn't tipped. It didn't feel like people were paying attention to what was going on. I do feel that's changed. I feel like, I mean, when I made Mother, the administration at the time, and maybe still was denying that climate change exists, and that it was
even worse,
and that it was impacted by humans, and so. But I do feel like there's a generation now of people working on it, and there's now great minds. For a long time, after I did Noah, which was kind of my first environmental film, which was somehow controversial. When I read the story Noah, or I thought about the story Noah in the Bible, it was so clearly an environmental story. I mean, he saves the animals. I mean, and then I got incredible pushback for trying to say that it was an environmental message, because I never realized that. It's a shame, definitely in America, and I think around the world, that talking about the environment is like a political issue now, which seems crazy to me because it's such a human issue. But when I did Noah, I started working with some green groups in America, and I joined the board of a few of the green groups to help. And we took a trip up to the Arctic, which is the last there's the Arctic Refuge in Alaska. And a refuge is different than a national park. A refuge actually has no infrastructure. It's just like a preserved piece of land that's completely untouched by human hand. It's actually where the present administration is starting to drill right now, so that's changing. But in general, when you're dropped off in the middle of it, which we were, you could go 400 kilometers in each direction and not see another human being. So I was trying to bring some celebrities to create some awareness, and not one was interested. Eventually, Kerry Russell, who you may know from TV, she joined us, and she's an amazing person and was incredibly helpful. But now, in today's world, I think if I was redoing that trip, there'd be many people that would want to join, which I'm not being cynical. I'm just saying people now are really involved. And so for myself, I'm not as focused on it, I would say, in my day-to-day life, because I really feel like there's much better minds actually doing the science and actually doing the hard work of it. So on a day-to-day basis, do I feel the same rage? Only if I really think about it.
One of the central themes running through a lot of your films is human nature. Now you just released a graphic novel, which I tried to look for today. In Belgium,
I'll send you a copy.
There's a lot of graphic novels here, but you have to wait until September.
We sold the French rights, so yeah. So sorry, it's not. We haven't sold the Dutch rights, or Flemish rights, but they're available for anyone in the house.
Not yet. The end of the year. Human nature. A lot of your films are about this horrifying, terrifying thing of human nature, and one of the central themes in a lot of your films is the complexity of human nature. When good people do bad things, and when bad people do good things. You know, the Orthodox Jewish people who are gangsters, and the policewoman who's a gangster, and the strange twist in human nature very often for some kind of reward. Either the award can be money, or addiction, or obsession. Do you think it's possible to save the planet with human nature being what it is?
Yeah, I'm going to try to give a positive answer to this. I actually, I would consider myself an optimist. I do think humanity has done incredible things. I think as we become more and more aware, there is a lot of thought out there, and there is a lot of vision of ways of doing it. I think that the possibility that it exists is enough to hold on to, that it could happen. Just that we have the idea of it, and that's part of human nature. We understand the destruction. We feel the pain. We can all share in the misery of seeing, you know, what plastics do to our oceans. We can all celebrate in the incredible beauty of watching a species raise an egg together and share that beauty together and relate to it in our own ways. So it's definitely within us to save ourselves and to figure it out. I'm wondering where that tipping point is, where people actually recognize that, you know, that the Nazis are about to invade Belgium, and we need to fight back, you know, and when that moment turns and the world gets its shit together to happen. I mean, I'm working on the rights of Kim Stanley Robinson's novel Ministry for the Future, which I encourage everyone to read, which was a sci-fi book written about. It was written during COVID, I think, and or it was released during COVID, and it talks about. I mean, it's ultimately a very optimistic film of humanity figuring it out, even though tremendous pain happens to the planet.
Up until the most recent film, your films were not really optimistic in the end. I mean, they're kind of about people fighting their demons, fighting their shadows, looping in a very strange, interesting circle. With Mother, the beginning and the end is exactly the same, but I have observed with Pi, the scene in the beginning where he's looking at the trees, comes back at the end. Something has changed. It's not a circle, it's more of a spiral. And this is something you do a lot. In even the Caught Stealing, it begins with a baseball match and ends with a baseball match, but something has shifted. And in many ways, a lot of the films are kind of about the darkness of human nature, that we don't learn from our mistakes. And we in a way, doomed to always repeat these endless cycles of obsession, self-destruction.
God, it's a very depressing afternoon.
But your last film is interesting, Caught Stealing, which you didn't write. But it's an interesting film because the guy saves himself from... So he was previously in a car crash, which haunted him. And he uses the experience of that car crash to actually save his own life, which is a kind of learning from mistakes.
Or maybe not save his own life, but to reap revenge.
That's for people to interpret. I'm sure you'd be the first person to say you're not going to fix the meaning of your film. But this is an interesting example where something traumatic and tragic in the past can actually be used for something positive in the future. Has your ideas of human nature shifted?
I mean, I think my kind of direction as an artist has shifted recently. I think when I was making some of the earlier films, and I talked about this last night, it was, we were living in a very, very shallow world where, as I was saying last night, Paris Hilton was the most famous person in the world when I released Requiem for a Dream. And I think it's shifted where, like, things feel really like they're heating up and much more intense, and people seem more divided and apart and at each other's throats than ever before. And I think the purpose of the cinema I'm interested in right now is to make films that are about entertainment and about unifying people. And so I've been searching for heroes that can bring people together, because I think that's also another power of cinema.
I mean, one of the statements you said in this regard is, shut up and dance. I don't know if it was exactly those words, but essentially. And it reminds
Where
me...
did I say that?
In one of the interviews.
Oh, wow.
In this context of entertainment and shut up and dance.
Yeah, have you ever seen Sullivan's Travels, the Preston Sturges movie? That's a great movie to go see. It's from the 1920s or 30s. It's called Sullivan's Travels, and it's about a filmmaker who's a great hit maker who decides he wants to make, it's in the 30s because it's during the Depression, and he decides he wants to go into the real world to make a film about real people, and his studio won't let him, so he runs away and he sneaks out into the world and he starts to live as a hobo, and he ends up getting arrested. And it goes from like a very kind of quick-talking Hollywood His Girl Friday type of movie to complete like neo-realism where he's in a true chain gang type of prison. I won't give away what it is, but the lesson he learns is that filmmaking is about it can be about giving people a way to escape.
Your quote about shut up and dance immediately made me think about Bertolt Brecht, who was asked the question, in dark times, will there be singing and dancing? And he said, yes, there will be singing and dancing about dark times.
That was his reply?
Mm-hmm. Which is great. Which is the opposite of Adorno, who said there will be no poetry after Auschwitz.
But there is poetry that was written during Auschwitz. I mean, that's one of the most amazing things when you're at Yad Vashem and you see the artwork that was created in the camps and discovered in the camps. I mean, people can't not create.
Well, that poses the question, is there not a responsibility for artists and filmmakers to embody the uncomfortable truths? And is there not the risk that going in the direction of entertainment will be erasing things that need to be remembered?
I mean, I think there's a place for everything. And I think that will always be served. It's interesting. It's like, I mean, you feel it all the time. I remember hearing that when Vietnam started in America, it launched a whole movement of horror films, of low-budget horror films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, Last House on the Left. All of these films came out that were super low-budget films that were breaking through and becoming financial successes, and they kind of were reflecting back what people were watching on TV for the first time. So I think there's so many different responses and artists will be all over the place. I mean, I've noticed, once again, when I did Mother, trying to get an audience for the type of things I was witnessing and thinking about, and it all started because when I was a teenager, I stumbled on this program called School for Field Studies, which trained young environmentalists, and I was for some reason fascinated by it, and I spent 2 summers with them, one in Alaska and one in Kenya, doing deep scientific research on animals. And since then I've been in Green Group, so it was always on my mind. And then definitely it was heating up as I was seeing, as all the science was coming in, and there was no one responding. And now I don't know if you notice it, but I'm sure you do. Now you go to the Biennale or to any type of gallery, and it doesn't seem like any artist is commenting on anything else. So once again, I feel like the space is filled with people trying to change the world in that way, and I don't know if I'm fully drawn to that, or if that's where I'm getting my energy for now. For right now, I think you got to follow whatever pulls you as an artist. For me, I've always been inspired by Madonna because she was always changing. Every album was a different look and a different aesthetic, except she was always in there, but she was through a different prism. And I think that's super important as an artist, that you keep reinventing yourself or exploring or really trying to find what's calling you inside. So I do feel that's what's calling me right now. So I'm not resisting it.
I'm sure that your versions of entertainment are going to be very different than, I guess, what we would be imagining of entertainment, because watching Caught Stealing this afternoon, I mean, we could also, I saw so many similarities in connection to Pi, which I don't know how many people see the connections, or to so many of your other films, even if it is perhaps one could say your most mainstream Hollywood film. But the reason why I want to stay on this question of entertainment is there was a book in 1985, Neil Postman, I think it was called Amusing Ourselves to Death or Entertaining Ourselves to Death, in which he compares Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, and George Orwell, 1984. And 1984 was this idea of rules and structures, and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World was closer to the world we're living in, where we are distracted by entertainment, where we're distracted by the constant adrenaline rush and the need to be distracted, which you speak about a lot when you speak about TikTok and social media, which takes us now also to this interesting subject of AI.
I think the world is more 1984, though, now, I would argue. It feels like Big Brother is much deeper into our lives than ever before. Like it actually exists. Not in the way that Orwell might have presented, but I mean, we all know how I have a newborn baby, and like I'm not on TikTok, but my Instagram, when I'm on it, which is very rare, is all about like how to teach. They know how old my baby is, and they know I'm trying to teach my baby how to swim. And I probably looked up one thing, and suddenly I'm flooded with endless things. So it's like we're so being watched.
Yeah, but that is not, 1984 in the surveillance, but Brave New World in the way it translates into entertainment.
Yeah.
And the danger, what happens today, because of the algorithm, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, TikTok being the most dangerous because it is actually observing your retina and your eyes and seeing...
Is it really?
Yes, it is. And so it's able to predict exactly what's exciting you and not exciting you in order to feed you what you want to see.
The camera's operating during TikTok? It's looking at your eyes?
Yes.
I did not know that. Wow.
I mean, I might be wrong, but at least it's something I read on one of these.
It's possible.
It's something I have read about on, obviously, Instagram, which is probably not correct, but probably is. But here is the threat, and here's the danger, is that...
It could be cool, though. It's a good idea.
But when you're on Instagram, you know that your feed is exactly what you're interested in, so you think the whole world agrees with you. And there's an enormous danger in that because it removes the facility to be critical. And isn't that the risk of entertainment? And how will you negotiate that very complex territory of Hollywood, who have very precise algorithms determining what people want to be entertained by today?
One thing, just I didn't catch the end of your question because you made me think about something else. But it's interesting because I do get both sides of. I'm really interested in extreme sides of many arguments just to see how far people go, and I think I do confuse the algorithms a little bit because I get served from both sides, and so I wonder where it actually kind of thinks I live, or I mean, does anyone else have that where you get both sides of the argument, or is everyone getting one argument? You know what I'm talking about, but it's weird because you'll get like the most angry people saying the exact opposite things. So, but I guess because I spend time on them, it thinks I'm interested in both, which I am. But
I certainly get both sides because I'm interested in both sides. Because as an artist, I'm interested in human nature. Why do we believe what we believe in? And of course, the middle three letters of the word believe is a lie. And how much of what we believe in is a consoling lie that we want to believe? Do you feel a responsibility as a filmmaker to your audience or not?
I mean, there's lots of responsibilities because you're using to make movies. It's a huge amount of capital to make a film. So there's beyond the responsibilities to the money sources. I mean, you're always thinking about your audience. For me, I think it comes down to the responsibility is audience engagement. That's where I never want to fail. I always never wanted to bore an audience. So all of my films, I feel, keep moving. I do think that they also, at times, make people look away, or they make people emotionally very uncomfortable. And I'm not necessarily like doing that on purpose. It's just the truth of the material leads me to those types of things. Like, I've always, like, since I was very young, made a commitment, if I was going to portray violence on screen, I wasn't going to Hollywoodize it, if that's a word. I was going to always treat it real. So, I mean, anyone who's fired a handgun and then watches handguns in films knows that they don't really represent how loud they are appropriately. So I've always tried, and then of course the violence that a gun does to another human, I just never wanted to make it not what it is. And so that's, I guess there's some type of responsibility to, I don't know, in some ways it might actually piss audience members off, but then again, it's a responsibility to the truth, I think. So I think I'm honest to, like, I try to be honest to the truth of how people are and how, because I think when you're making something fictional, you have to ground it in something real. And I talked about this last night too. I can never do a scene where, like, people have stylized dialogue. The only way I could really judge if it's real is if I'm watching someone and I go, oh, that person looks like they're talking to another person. That feels real to me. And then I'll, because I'll always watch movies and that's the first thing that feels strange to me, is when actors are, like, acting. That's when it's always weird.
And your project about George Washington with generative AI looks incredibly real. Yeah. But they're not real. It's entirely computer generated.
Yeah. I mean, it's not entirely computer generated. There's humans that are, working with the machines. How we do I started a project called, that I'm producing, called On This Day, ... 1776, which is, it's the 250th anniversary of America, if you haven't realized from the UFC fight the other night. But, and so, as a proud American, I wanted to help celebrate it. Also, I controlled the rights to Ron Chernow's book on George Washington for a long time. Ron Chernow's the guy who wrote the Hamilton book that the Broadway show was written about. And I never got the film made, but I knew so much about 1776, and so me and my partners were like, oh, let's try to use this new technology to tell these little short films about what happened on so-and-so day 250 years ago. And it's been an incredibly fun project, but how we do it is there's a writer's room that chooses the dates of what days are interesting to us. And then there's writers, actual human writers, that fully write it by themselves. And then, of course, it gets edited by humans. And then we bring on a director who uses generative technology to start creating images. And some of them are done photoreal, most of them. This week we're releasing one that's full-on anime, which is a great one because it turns out Thomas Jefferson, this 250 years ago this week, or last week, was in a rented apartment at 33 years old, working out the Declaration of Independence, some of the most famous words. So we turned it into an anime where him and King George are fist fighting over the right use of words, and it came out really, really good. It comes out this week. But yeah, and we're also using humans to do the voices, and now we've started to do performance capture, because what we've realized is the computers are creating absolutely human-looking humans, as you probably have seen, but there's a certain type of emptiness to them that we find by using real humans to puppet them, they become more alive.
I mean, you have noted, even in working on this project with Primordial Soup, how quickly the technology is evolving, and how the speed or the acceleration of the evolution of the technology is not going to be long before it's going to be like so human that we won't recognize the difference. And you have been very supportive of this technology. Is there not a risk that generative AI will be able to backtrack and shift our understandings of history and become a political weapon?
Absolutely. I mean, it's happening. The example is, when the New York Times existed for a couple of hundred years, people didn't own printing presses. So it was very hard to manufacture something that looked like a newspaper on that scale, at that speed. And then to become a journalist, you actually had to go through many, many hurdles to eventually get that job and to hold that job and to actually get a byline. But as we all saw with the rise of the internet, you can be anyone and create anything as good that looks like nytimes.com on the internet and put whatever bullshit or whatever form of journalism you want to put up there, no matter how rich or not rich it is. And it looks exactly the same as the New York Times. And so we've lost faith in so much of like what is the narrative that we should all be following. And absolutely these tools will be used to kind of change our perception of reality in ways that we can't even imagine.
Do you not feel that the stuff that you're doing might not be making you complicit with a future weapon?
I think that it's here, it exists, it's being used all over the world, it's not stopping, and that unless artists get in front of it and get control of these tools and start using it to tell the stories they want to tell, there's less chance that we'll have a successful future. So I've been going to the technology companies and say, you need to be led by artists. If we leave it to the engineers and the people counting the dollars, we're definitely going to lose. And it's, I mean, sure, people will, there might be a revolution and they might start blowing up data centers and there might be a civil war over it. And that's one possibility that can happen. But that's going to be a mess as well. And I don't know which future is happening, but if these tools continue to be used, which they will be, I think it's super important for every artist to get engaged, to understand it, to wield it, and to start expressing themselves and explaining to the world how they're expressing themselves.
So you do think of yourself as an artist?
Pardon?
You do think of yourself as an artist?
I think at times I do it, yeah.
Plato wanted to exclude artists from the Republic because they were dangerous, they broke rules, they think out of the box. In many ways, I think the artist is there to say when the emperor is naked. I think in many ways, the artist, when I think about all the great artists, they were never really socially refined. I mean, they always broke more rules than they... and you have, in some of your films, you have encountered various different problems, whether it was in The Whale. You've had different scandals at different times. I mean, what is your feeling on the new wave of cancel culture?
Is there a new wave of cancel culture?
Well, what do you feel about cancel culture? Do you think artists should be, for instance, one of your you do cite Roman Polanski as an influence, who has been called out. What do we?
Well, I don't think. I mean that's two different questions. I think art is art. The creator behind it somehow changing what that impact of that art is. I think it can add context to it and understanding and thought, but I think art exists and should be looked at for the art that it is. I mean, I grew up learning storytelling as a very young boy on Bill Cosby records. Bill Cosby is undeniably like one of the great masters of comedy. No one's as good of a storyteller as he is, and I basically memorized those LPs. And of course, the crimes he committed are horrendous and unforgivable. But it doesn't take away from the emotional impact of that work. I mean, maybe it does take away from it somewhat because it changes how I experience it, because I think I'm not just thinking about the humor, I think about some of the pain and all of that stuff. But so that's one issue that's complicated. But I definitely look, I try to that's an argument that's been going on a while. Does if the behavior of the artist is so terrible, does it destroy the art they make?
Well, the question is, do we separate the art from the artist?
Yeah, which I think it's probably super important too. I think the whole idea of genius culture, which has become something that's crazy in the West. There's so many fucking geniuses out there. When there's really not. There's just a lot of interesting pieces of art. But the other one, it's interesting. There are lack of language to describe certain things, and I think the cancel culture has been so complicated. I don't know what it's been like here in Europe, and it's absolutely, there was a correction that needed to happen. I mean, the type of behavior I've witnessed in Hollywood is now not there. There's a different level of respect between people, and that's a positive. But I think it was also very, very weaponized against a lot of people as well. So it's super complicated. I think as power dynamics shift, abuse continues in all different types of ways.
In your recent films, have you self-censored or in any way shifted the way you work because of these problems?
I mean, I think there is a different kind of culture on set that I noticed. Although I'm not sure. I'm thinking it's funny because the first time I got, after the whole Me Too movement, the first time I was on set was on The Whale, but we were also wearing masks. It was during COVID, and so the entire experience was very, very subdued. But I think psychologically, being in a mask and working together with people was just so psychologically weird that I don't know if it had anything to do with what was happening culturally, or if it was truly just the biological fear we were all living with. I mean, Caught Stealing, we had a lot of fun on set. And, there's always jokes when someone makes a silly joke, someone screams out, call human resources. We've all heard that joke, and it's not funny anymore, but it was made for a while. But, I don't know. I as far as my own work, I don't think so. I mean, I was completely I knew The Whale was going to be a challenging film for a lot of people, but it was such an exercise in empathy, that movie. Sam Hunter, the man who wrote it, dealt with obesity in his own life, and it was maybe not on the scale of the Brendan Fraser character, but he wrote it from his heart. And then we got attacked for, using makeup to create the illusion of this human being that would have been impossible to actually find a 400 or 500 pound, 200-300 kilo person to bring on set. Would have been just impossible to work with someone like that for medical reasons. So, and the fact that the film got attacked about that, it just kind of missed the whole point of it. And so I did feel like it was devouring the movie at times for reasons that didn't quite make sense to me.
I mean, you mentioned last night the world is changing a lot, and in the most recent film, they mentioned a few times the world is broken, the world is messed up. I mean, and so there is this idea of trying to fix something that's broken, and we need to go back and revisit our relationships between genders, our relationships of how we create, our relationships of how we create our exorcisms, and And of course, artists need to speak about the unspeakable, because that's the role of artists. Otherwise, they're just decorators. In your own identity as a man, I mean, I notice you're wearing white nail polish. That's really interesting.
Does it scare you?
Not at all. I was looking at it last night.
Purple
and I was
socks.
jealous. I was thinking, wow. I mean, this is beautiful. This is kind of, you
should see my toenails.
Can we see them?
Of course. Thank you.
I mean, this is a beautiful way of embodying masculinity, which is breaking out of the stereotype of what
Is
a
it?
successful Hollywood director needs to look like.
Really?
I don't know how many Hollywood directors, male Hollywood directors. Who
I don't know. I'm not counting that these days. I mean, it started. My mom passed away like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 3, 4 years ago, and she loved her nails. And so I started going to the nail salon as to honor her and to think about her. And then I realized that women basically got their shit going on and they know the secret. I mean, to have someone else cut your nails and your toenails and wipe off your calluses, like, who wouldn't do that? Anyway, if any guy who's never had a medi-pedi, next time in New York, you'll be my date. And it's great. I bring all my, like, very, very straight, nervous men. You're very welcome to come. And we sit there, and for 2 hours, we sit there and we just chat and have a good time. So anyway, it's a good time.
The female characters in your films are always very complex and contradictory.
Thank you. So are the males.
Yeah, but the males are more what we could imagine them to be. And there's always the...
What are you trying? Ooh.
There's always the binary of...
Ooh, canceled. Sorry.
I mean, when I was a kid growing up in South Africa, I was a punk, and I'd love to speak to you about punk, because you always have punks in your film some way, somehow. I love the mohawk. I had a mohawk in 1997. I had a mohawk. I was a punk, and I was dealing with my masculinity. I was an activist, and Pi came out, and I was struggling with a lot of things as an artist. Do I follow a road of punk? But I was also I was on a spiritual mission, and Pi comes out, and there's the Kabbalah, and there's mysticism, and there's also Pi almost in a way always seems to have typecast you as the guy who makes films about the Kabbalah because it was spoken about. People don't speak about the business people who with the chip. It was interesting because you had the business people and the religious people, and then you had the character who was obsessed about finding the number. And using the number for good reasons. And the others were, and he was caught in this dialogue between take the money or take the faith. And it doesn't really ever get resolved. But the other thing that I loved about Pi was the soundtrack. I mean, I felt personally connected to it because Ortica, one of the main people in Ortica, was married to a South African girl, so I felt this deep connection to, okay, that's an amazing band, and Ortica, Orbital, Aphex Twin. I mean, it was the most amazing soundtrack, which just galvanized a young punk looking for direction in life.
Thank you.
Speak about the soundtracks in your films?
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting one. I'm glad that a punk was able to recognize that what was happening in electronic music in the late 90s was a kind of punk thing.
Well, I think it was like post-punk, but
Yeah.
it was absolutely genius.
What's post-punk now? Does it exist?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's a guy with nail polish.
Exactly. Thank you. Maybe that's why it is. I've always wanted to be a punk. I mean, it's interesting. Punk is kind of like the movement of the youth. That's kind of fuck you to this establishment. And it's super complicated now because it's just not clear where the lines are anymore. But let's talk more about that.
But what I also loved about that film was the black and white, and I know that you said Mother was based on Exterminating Angel of Louis Buñuel.
Well, inspired by it.
Yeah. To what degree were you quoting Buñuel's Andalusian Dog in Pi with the ants?
Not at all. I hadn't seen it at that point. I've only actually seen that recently, to be honest. The ants came out of It's a funny story, I think, the ant story, although I can't quite remember it. But I think it came from a dream while I was making the film, and I woke up screaming. I lived in the same apartment as my producer, and I was like, "We need ants. We definitely need ants." And my father was a science teacher, and there's an amazing catalog he used to get called Carolina Biological Supplies, and it was this strange place, I guess, in the Carolinas in America that just would supply biological supplies for high school teachers, which he was. And I'd always look through it, and they, sure enough, sold ants. And you could buy, they would mail you ants that had some ice around them, which kept them cold. And so we kept the ants in the fridge during Pi. And my mom actually on that movie did craft services. So she was like making food for everyone. And she didn't know that there were ants in the bucket. And there was suddenly during a shot, a huge scream let out and destroyed because she found the ants and was freaked out by it. So
Pi, it wasn't your first film. You said, well, you didn't make your first film, but it was your first major film. You made it with a shoestring budget by getting money from friends. I mean, everything was done kind of DIY, and I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. And I watched it again recently. It's absolutely brilliant. If you remade that film today with AI and all the tools that you have in your hands, how would you make it differently?
Oh, it would be completely different. I mean, every film is restrained by the technology that you're using and the budget that you're using. Almost every single decision probably had to do with our limitations of what we could kind of accomplish, and then we just would push it. You know, we were like, this is going to be our limit, but we're going to go. I mean, we ended up shooting. We only had the camera for a certain window. We rented the camera from some cinematographer who owned a 16 millimeter camera. And for the last 13 days, we didn't stop. We kept shooting. And then for the last 36 hours, me and my DP kept shooting. We ended up in my apartment, which was a 5th floor walk up in Hell's Kitchen, New York. And we were shooting all the inserts in the Hebrew letters and the math numbers. We just had tons of books. And we were just sitting there shooting book after book after book, all good. And eventually, at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, after 36 hours, the producer walked in and he was like, "What the fuck are you doing? We got to return the camera." And that's how that movie ended. So we were always about just pushing it all the way to the edge.
Are there any questions?
Thank you. And, you know, just as a disclaimer, I am a journalist, but one of the things that we have picked up this year a lot in Berlin, the Berlin Alley, which was very messy, Cannes too, is there's a real, I don't want to say fear, but certainly a form of tension with actors and producers of films to get into politics. Almodovar, who I think we can agree is a great director, he said, if you're an artist and you go to a festival and you're scared to talk about what's happening in the world, then that is a failure for an artist. Do you feel that? And I wonder, there's incredible concentration now in terms of the studios, who are the owners, the resources around it. Is there a form of censorship just simply because the same people own everything ultimately? Thanks.
I have 2 questions. The last one, I would say, like, the studios have always been owned by very few power brokers. So I don't feel that's changed, and the kind of language around that of a conspiracy or how it's changed. I mean, when Godfather was made, Paramount was owned by Gulf and Western, big oil company. So I don't know if that's changed really. I think it's just always been a few players, and if anything, there's more players now in it with the tech companies making content. And I also think that's changing in huge ways because you have all different types of, we're going to start to see content emerging in all different types of ways. The other element is like, it's politics, and it goes back to a little bit what I was talking about at the beginning of this conversation, which was, when I was doing work for the environment and for the Sierra Club and for the School for Field Studies and some other green groups that I was on, it was really hard to get anyone to talk about politics. And then it became really vogue for everyone to have a cause and to talk about politics. And what I noticed, and it's funny because at a certain point, we kind of capitalized after that. I was doing a lot of public service announcements, PSAs, with movie stars that were suddenly like willing to like show up in commercials for the Sierra Club or do voiceovers for an ad we were doing. But then we started to notice that it was kind of backfiring, where basically anyone who was like famous that they were talking about, it kind of started to turn people off. And I've had a lot of actors come to me, like, you know, during the last election and the question of like, should we get involved? And, you know, and not just, but get involved as a spokesperson, like a, and I don't know if that's the work that needs to be done. I think the work that needs to be done is like the actual work on the ground and being involved. I think, I don't know. I think being out there in a political way in today's world, it's super complicated because so many people are wrapped up into, have wrapped their politics into their identity. And it doesn't feel like people are really having human-to-human conversations anymore. It feels like people are screaming at each other. And so for me, I find it very confusing because I definitely want to have an impact on the world, but I feel like it's best to like find that through true human emotion and true human stories, and let the work, you know, speak for itself. And the work I respond to most is like the complicated work. I don't know if there was the film that won Cannes this year. I actually got to see it. Did you see Fjord? It's an unbelievable film. And it's so complicated. And the conversations I had afterwards with people who identified on the left and people who identified on the right, it was fascinating to me because for me, I was just moved by the emotion and the pain of that family and the complexity of it. And I never even thought I guess the politics were there for me, but I wasn't really thinking about that. I was really as a father, being in that family pain. And then I realized it's an incredibly political movie, and people are super pissed off that it won. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's such a human story, and it's great that it's not clear what it's saying about the politics. It's just sort of showing how complicated the politics are. And I think that's what we need more of in this world, is like not the black and white, where people are saying slogans in 3-second clips, but where people are really committed to exploring the in-between. You know, I did a film called Holding Liat this year, which was about an Israeli hostage family, and it was smack in the middle, where people who are very, very right-wing found it too left, and people who found it left found it too right. It was right in the middle. And it was really interesting to see the center come out for that film and try to support it. And I think that's like where, as artists, we need to be, is not carrying slogans, but more about like carrying our humanity forward.
Well, after that, there's nothing else we can say. Thank you so much for your generosity.